to the 1,000 Nights and one Night. Now, when it was the 265th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Calamity Ahmad cried, O Allah al-Din, what is this deed thou hast done? The mercy of Allah be on him who said, Whoso trusteth thee betrayeth him not, in thou be a traitor. Now the Caliph set thee in high place about him, and styled thee trusty and faithful. How then couldst thou deal thus with him, and steal his goods? By the most great name, O my father and chief, replied Allah al-Din, I had no hand in this, nor did I such deed, nor know I who did it. Quoth Ahmad, Of a surety none did this but a manifest enemy, and whoso doth aught shall be requited for his deed. But, O Allah al-Din, thou canst sojourn no longer in Baghdad, for kings, O my son, may not pass from one thing to another, and when they go in quest of a man, longsome is his travail. Whither shall I go, O my chief? Asked Allah al-Din. And he answered, O my son, I will bring thee to Alexandria, for it is a blessed place. Its threshold is green, and its sojourn is agreeable. And Allah al-Din rejoined, I hear and I obey, O my chief. So Ahmad said to Hasan Shuman, Be mindful, and when the Caliph asketh for me, say, He is gone touring about the provinces. Then taking Allah al-Din, he went forth of Baghdad, and stayed not going till they came to the outlying vineyards and gardens, where they met 2 Jews of the Caliph's tax gatherers riding on mules. Quoth Ahmad al-Danaf to these, Give me the blackmail. And quoth they, Why should we pay thee blackmail? Whereto he replied, Because I am the watchman of this valley. So they took him each 100 gold pieces, after which he slew them and took their mules, one of which he mounted whilst Allah al-Din bestrode the other. Then they rode on till they came to the city of Ayas, and put up their beasts for the night in the khan. Now when morning dawned, Allah al-Din sold his own mule and committed that of Ahmad to the charge of the doorkeeper of the caravanserai, after which they took ship from Ayas port and sailed to Alexandria. Here they landed and walked up to the bazaar, and behold, there was a broker crying a shop and a chamber behind it for 950 dinars. Upon this, Allah al-Din bid 1,000, which the broker accepted. For the premises belonged to the treasury, and the seller handed him over the keys, and the buyer opened the shop, and found the inner parlor furnished with carpets and cushions. Moreover, he found there a storeroom full of sails and masts, cordage and seaman's chests, bags of beads and cowrie shells, stirrups, battle axes, maces, knives, scissors, and such matters, for the last owner of the shop had been a dealer in second-hand goods. So he took his seat in the shop, and Ahmad al-Danaf said to him, O my son, the shop and the room and that which is therein are become thine. So tarry thou here, and buy and sell, and repine not at thy lot, for Almighty Allah's blessed trade. After this he abode with him 3 days, and on the 4th he took leave of him, saying, Abide here, till I go back and bring thee the Caliph's pardon, and learn who hath played thee this trick. Then he shipped for Ayas, where he took the mule from the inn, and returning to Baghdad, met Pestilence Hassan and his followers, to whom saith he, Hath the Caliph asked after me? And he replied, No, nor hast thou come to his thought. So he resumed his service about the Caliph's person, and set himself to sniff about for the news of Allah al-Din's case, till one day he heard the Caliph say to the Wazir, See, O Jafar, how Allah al-Din dealt with me? Replied the minister, O commander of the faithful, thou hast requited him with hanging, and hath he not met with his reward? Quoth he, O Wazir, I have a mind to go down and see him hanging. And the Wazir answered, Do what thou wilt, O commander of the faithful. So the Caliph, accompanied by Jafar, went down to the palace of the execution, and raising his eyes saw the hanged man to be other than Allah al-Din Abu Al-Shamat, surnamed the Trusty, and said, O Wazir, this is not Allah al-Din. How knowest thou that it is not he? Asked the minister. And the Caliph answered, Allah al-Din was short, and this one is tall. Quoth Jafar, hanging stretcheth. Quoth the Caliph, Allah al-Din was fair, and this one's face is black. Said Jafar, knowest thou not, O Commander of the Faithful, that death is followed by blackness? Then the Caliph bade take down the body from the gallows tree, and they found the names of the two sheikhs, Abu Bakr and Omar, written on its heels. Whereupon cried the Caliph, O Wazir, Allah al-Din was a Sunnite, and this fellow is a rejecter, a Shia. He answered, Glory be to Allah who knoweth the hidden things, while we know not whether this was Allah al-Din or other than he. Then the Caliph bade bury the body, and they buried it, and Allah al-Din was forgotten, as though he had never been. Such was the case. But as regards Habslan Bazah, and the Emir Khalid's son, he ceased not to languish for love and longing till he died, and they joined him to the dust. As for the young wife Jessamine, she accomplished the months of her pregnancy, and being taken with labor pains, gave birth to a boy child like unto the moon. And when her fellow slave girls said to her, What wilt thou name him? She answered, Were his father well, he had named him, but now I will name him Aslan. She gave him suck for 2 successive years, then weaned him, and he crawled and he walked. Now it came to pass that one day, whilst his mother was busied with the service of the kitchen, the boy went out, and seeing the stairs, mounted to the guest chamber. And the Emir Khalid, who was sitting there, took him upon his lap, and glorified his Lord for that which he had created and fashioned. Then, closely eyeing his face, the governor saw that he was the likeness of all creatures to Allah al-Din Abu al-Shamat. Presently his mother Jessamine sought for him, and finding him not, mounted to the guest chamber, where she saw the Emir seated with the boy, playing in his lap, for Allah had inclined his heart to the boy. And when the child espied his mother, he would have thrown himself upon her, but the Emir held him tight to his bosom, and said to Jessamine, Come hither, O damsel. So she came to him, when he said to her, Whose son is this? And she replied, He is my son, and the fruit of my vitals. And who is his father? Asked the Emir. And she answered, His father was the Allah al-Din Abu al-Shamat, but now he is become thy son. Quoth Khalid, In very sooth, Allah al-Din was a traitor. Quoth she, Allah deliver him from treason. The heavens forfend and forbend that the trustee should be a traitor. Then said he, When this boy shall grow up and reach man's estate, and say to thee, Who is my father? Say to him, Thou art the son of the Emir Khalid, governor and chief of police. And she answered, I hear and I obey. Then he circumcised the boy, and reared him with the goodliest rearing, and engaged for him a professor of law and religious science, and an expert penman who taught him to read and write. So he read the Koran twice, and learned it by heart. And he grew up saying to the Emir, O my father! Moreover, the governor used to go down with him to the tilting ground, and assemble horsemen, and teach the lad the fashion of fight and fray, and the place to plant lance thrust and sabre stroke, so that by the time he was 14 years old, he became a valiant wight, an accomplished knight, and gained the rank of Emir. Now it chanced one day that Aslan fell in with Ahmad Kamakan, the arch thief, and accompanied him as a cup companion to the tavern. And behold, Ahmad took out the jeweled lanthorn he had stolen from the Caliph, and setting it before him, pledged the wine cup to its light till he became drunken. So Aslan said to him, O captain, give me the lanthorn. But he replied, I cannot give it to thee. Asked Aslan, Why not? And Ahmad answered, Because lives have been lost for it. Whose life? Inquired Aslan. And Ahmad rejoined, There came hither a man who was made chief of the 60. His name was Allah al-Din Abu al-Shamat, and he lost his life through this lanthorn. Quoth Aslan, and what was the story and what brought about his death. Quoth Ahmad Kamakin, Thou hast an elder brother by name Habslan Bazah, and when he reached the age of 16 and was ripe for marriage, thy father would have bought him a slave girl named Jessamine. He went on to tell the whole story from first to last of Habslan Bazah's illness and what befell Ala al-Din in his innocence. When Aslan heard this, he said in thought, Happily this slave girl was my mother, Jessamine, and my father was none other than Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat. So the boy went out from him sorrowful and met Calamity Ahmad, who at sight of him exclaimed, Glory be to him unto whom none is like. Asked Hassan the pestilence, Whereat dost thou marvel, O my chief? And Ahmad the Calamity replied, At the make of yonder boy Aslan, for he is the likest of human creatures to Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat. Then he called the lad, and he said to him, O Aslan, what is thy mother's name? To which he replied, She is called the damsel Jessamine. And the other said, Hearke, Aslan, be of good cheer, and keep thine eyes cool and clear, for thy father was none other than Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat. But, O my son, go thou in to thy mother, and question her of thy father. He said, Hearkening and obedience. And going in to his mother, put the question, whereupon quoth she, Thy sire is Emir Khalad. Not so, rejoined he. My father was none other than Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat. At this the mother wept and said, Who acquainted thee with this, O my son? And he answered, Ahmad al-Danaf, captain of the guard. So she told him the whole story, saying, O my son, the true hath prevailed and the false hath failed. Know that Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat was indeed thy sire, but it was none save the Emir Khalid who reared thee and adopted thee as his son. And now, O my child, when thou seest Ahmad al-Danaf the captain, do thou say to him, I conjure thee by Allah, O my chief, take my blood revenge on the murder of my father Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat. So he went out from his mother, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 266th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Aslan went out from his mother, and betaking himself to Calamity Ahmad, kissed his hand. Quoth the captain, What aileth thee, O Aslan? And quoth he, I know now for certain that my father was Ali al-Din Abu al-Shamat, and I would have thee take my blood revenge on his murderer. He asked, And who was thy father's murderer? Whereto Aslan answered, Ahmad Kamakin, the arch-thief. Who told thee this? Inquired he. And Aslan rejoined, I saw in his hand the jeweled lanthorn, which was lost from the rest of the caliph's gear. And I said to him, Give me this lanthorn. But he refused, saying, Lives have been lost on account of this. And he told it was he who had broken into the palace and stolen the articles and deposited them in my father's house. Then said Ahmad al-Danaf, When thou seest the Emir Khalad, don his harness of war, and say to him, Equip me like thyself, and take me with thee. Then do thou go forth and perform some feat of prowess before the commander of the faithful. And he will say to thee, Ask a boon of me, O Aslan. And do thou make answer, I ask of thee this boon, that thou take my blood revenge on my father's murderer. If he say, Thy father is yet alive, and is Emir Khalad, the chief of the police, answer thou, My father was Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat, and Emir Khalad hath a claim upon me only as the foster father who adopted me. Then tell him all that passed between thee and Ahmad Kamakin, and say, O Prince of true believers, order him to be searched, and I will bring the lanthorn forth from his bosom. Thereupon said Aslan to him, I hear and I obey. And returning to the Emir Khalad, found him making ready to repair to the Caliph's court, and said to him, I would fain have thee arm and harness me like thyself, and take me with thee to the divan. So he equipped him and carried him thither. Then the Caliph sallied forth of Baghdad with his troops, and they pitched tents and pavilions without the city. Whereupon the host divided into two parties, and forming ranks, fell to playing polo, one striking the ball with a mallet, and the other striking it back to him. Now there was among the troops a spy who had been hired to slay the Caliph. So he took the ball, and smiting it with the bat, drove it straight at the Caliph's face, when behold, Aslan fended it off, and catching it, drove it back at him who smote it, so that it struck him between the shoulders, and he fell to the ground. The Caliph exclaimed, Allah bless thee, O Aslan! And they dismounted and sat on chairs. Then the Caliph bade them bring the smiter of the ball before him, and said, Who tempted thee to do this thing, and art thou friend or foe? Quoth he, I am thy foe, and it was my purpose to kill thee. Asked the Caliph, And wherefore art not a Moslem? Replied the spy, No, I am a rejecter. So the Caliph bade them put him to death, and said to Aslan, Ask a boon of me. Quoth he, I ask of thee this boon, that thou take my blood revenge on my father's murderer. He said, Thy father is alive, and there he stands on his 2 feet. And who is he? Asked Aslan. And the Caliph answered, He is the Emir Khalad, chief of police. Rejoined Aslan, O Commander of the Faithful, he is no father of mine, save by right of fosterage. My father was none other than Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat. Then thy father was a traitor, cried the Caliph. Allah forbid, O Commander of the Faithful, rejoined Aslan, that the trustee should be a traitor. But how did he betray thee? Quoth the Caliph, He stole my habit, and what was therewith? Aslan retorted, O Commander of the Faithful, Allah forfend that my father should be a traitor. But, O my lord, when thy habit was lost and found, didst thou likewise recover the lanthorn which was stolen from thee? Answered the Caliph, We never got it back. And Aslan said, I saw it in the hands of Ahmad Kamakin, and begged it of him, but he refused to give it to me, saying, Lives have been lost on account of this. Then he told me of the sickness of Habslan Bazar, son of the Emir Khalad, by reason of his passion for the damsel of Jessamine, and how he himself was released from bonds, and that he was he who stole the habit and the lamp. So do thou, O Commander of the Faithful, take my blood revenge for my father on him who murdered him. At once the Caliph cried, Seize ye Ahmad Kamakin! And they seized him. Whereupon he asked, Where be the captain Ahmad al-Danaf? And when he was summoned, the Caliph bade him search Kamakin. So he put his hand into the thief's bosom and pulled out the lanthorn. Said the Caliph, Come hither, thou traitor, whence hast thou this lanthorn? And Kamakin replied, I bought it, O Commander of the Faithful. The Caliph rejoined, Where didst thou buy it? Then they beat him till he owned that he had stolen the lanthorn, the habit, and the rest. And the Caliph said, What moved thee to do this, O traitor, and ruin Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat, the trusty and the faithful? Then they bade them lay hands on him, and on the chief of police. But the chief said, O Commander of the Faithful, indeed I am unjustly treated. Thou badest me hang him, and I had no knowledge of this trick. The plot was contrived between the old woman and Ahmad Kamakin and my wife, and I crave thine intercession, O Aslan. So Aslan interceded for him with the Caliph, who said, What hath Allah done with this youngster's mother? Answered Khalid, She is with me. And the Caliph continued, I command that thou order thy wife to dress her in her own clothes and ornaments, and restore her to her former degree, a lady of rank, and do thou remove the seals from Ala al-Din's house, and give his son possession of his estate. I hear and I obey, answered Khalid, and going forth, gave the order to his wife, who clad Jessamine in her own apparel, whilst he himself removed the seals from Ala al-Din's house, and gave Aslan the keys. Then saith the Caliph, Ask a boon of me, O Aslan. And he replied, I beg of thee the boon to unite me with my father. Whereat the Caliph wept and said, Most like thy sire was he that was hanged and is dead. But by the life of my forefathers, whoso bringeth me the glad news that he is yet in bondage of this life, I will give him all he seeketh. Then came forward Ahmad al-Danaf, and kissing the ground between his hands, said, Grant me amnesty, O commander of the faithful. Thou hast it, answered the Caliph. And Calamity Ahmad said, I give thee the good news that Allah al-Din Abu al-Shamat, the trusty, the faithful, is alive and well. Quoth the Caliph, What is this thou sayest? Quoth al-Danaf, As thy head liveth, I say sooth, for I ransomed him with another of whom deserved death, and carried him to Alexandria, where I opened for him a shop, and set him up as a dealer in second-hand goods. Then said the prince of the true believers, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. And so do I cease my tale for the day, until it be morrow.